Democratic MC accused Trump of relying on Elon Musk to win power. Trump immediately screamed fire. America is focused on a significant event tonight. A live television debate is about to take place, one that promises to be a fierce political showdown. On one side, we have Donald Trump, the incumbent president who has weathered numerous storms during his time in office. On the other side is Victoria Lane, a well-known reporter famous for her sharp questions and her critical stance on Trump's administration. The two are seated across from each other, the bright studio lights illuminating their faces. The audience in the studio, along with millions of viewers at home, are paying close attention to every word, every reaction. Tonight, there is no room for compromise or softness. It's a battle of ideologies, one where the two sides will clash intensely. Victoria Lane opens the debate with a heavy question. She looks straight into Trump's eyes, showing no sign of hesitation. We've heard some disturbing rhetoric coming from Democratic officials. People like Ilhan Omar and Chris Van Holland have called for war, even suggesting that protests on the streets might be the next step. My question is, Mr. Trump, do you think your administration has contributed to this charged political climate? Do you feel responsible for fostering this environment where political protests and violence seem inevitable? Victoria's question is not just a critique of Trump, but an accusation that his administration has played a role in creating a polarized, tension-filled political atmosphere. Donald Trump, calm and collected, doesn't rush to answer. He meets Victoria's gaze, his face confident. "Thank you, Victoria," Trump begins. "I don't agree with your premise. My administration has always worked for the prosperity and security of this country. What you call rhetoric is simply the truth. We are addressing the biggest issues the nation faces, like illegal immigration and government inefficiency. And frankly, I don't see division. I see necessary discussions that will move this country forward." Victoria Lane isn't easily deterred, she interrupts. "But don't you acknowledge that while you and your allies criticize the Democratic Party, your administration has indirectly encouraged protests and political tensions? Haven't you done enough to calm the situation? To stop Americans from viewing each other as enemies?" Trump raises an eyebrow, his expression unreadable. "We're not encouraging violence or division. We're taking legal measures to protect the nation. And unlike the Democrats, who are inciting violence and calling it war, we're calling for peace and stability." The debate begins to intensify. Each of Victoria's questions hits hard, and Trump counters with his usual defiance. But there's another issue brewing outside of this debate. Elon Musk, Trump's close ally, has been playing an important role in the administration. Musk is overseeing the efficiency of government spending, but his companies also have federal contracts, something that has become a target for criticism. Victoria Lane, never missing an opportunity, raises this issue. "Mr. President, do you think there's a conflict of interest in having Elon Musk, who owns companies with federal contracts, overseeing government spending in your administration?" Trump doesn't seem surprised by the question. He's been preparing for such criticisms. Elon Musk is an incredibly talented individual, and he's overseeing this efficiently. He's working tirelessly to ensure that the government spending is responsible. Musk has experience in technology and business, and he knows how to make the government function efficiently. "I trust him completely." Victoria doesn't relent. "But isn't it a clear conflict of interest? His companies have contracts with the government. How can you ensure that decisions regarding government spending aren't influenced by his personal business interests?" Trump takes a deep breath and looks at Victoria, his demeanor calm but firm. "As I've said before, Elon Musk follows all ethical and legal guidelines. If there's ever a conflict of interest, Elon will step aside. We've made sure every decision is in the best interest of the American people. But deep down, Trump knows these questions won't end here. Everyone is aware that, despite his reassurances, the web of connections in his administration is a major concern for many. As the debate continues, Victoria isn't finished. She moves on to other hot-button issues, one of them being Gaza. She brings up the ongoing conflict between Israel and Hamas and asks if Trump's administration is considering military action. Trump listens carefully, then responds, "We have not committed to sending troops into Gaza, but we will do whatever it takes to support the rebuilding of the region. We will work with partners in the region like Egypt, Jordan, and others to stabilize the area. Victoria isn't satisfied. But what about the Palestinians? They don't want to leave Gaza. Do you really understand their plight? Or are you simply using them as pawns in a political game? Trump looks directly into the camera, speaking with a calm but assertive voice. Gaza is a region torn apart by Hamas. They've turned it into a place that's uninhabitable for its people. We want to help rebuild it, but we need to remove the elements causing instability first. The debate continues. Victoria now focusing on women's rights and the issue of transgender athletes. She asks Trump how his administration plans to address the controversy surrounding trans women competing in women's sports. Trump, unflinching, replies, "We've been clear. The Olympic Committee and the NCAA must stop allowing men to compete in women's sports. This is something the American people want. Women's sports should be for women, and that's something I'm committed to." Victoria challenges him again. But isn't this a violation of human rights? Doesn't it expose young people to discrimination? Aren't you alienating an entire community? Trump's expression hardens. It's already women and girls who've been discriminated against, forced to compete against biological males. That's unfair and unsafe. We're putting an end to that. Victoria presses on. And what about the media? How do you respond to the criticism that your executive orders, like this one, are nothing more than political moves to curry favor with your base? Trump doesn't miss a beat. This is about protecting American women. It's what the people want. And if the media doesn't like it, that's their problem. The tension in the studio is palpable as Victoria Lane presses Donald Trump with another sharp question. The audience shifts in their seats, watching the two figures clash on national television. The stakes are high, and every word is being scrutinized. Victoria doesn't let up. She's not just asking questions. She's pushing Trump into a corner, trying to expose any flaws in his administration's policies. Mr. Trump, she begins again, you've made it clear that your administration is focused on efficiency, but the government's budget continues to grow, and now we've learned that millions of taxpayer dollars have gone to subsidizing media outlets like Politico. How can you justify this kind of spending when so many Americans are struggling? Trump's face tightens, but he remains composed. He's been asked about this before, but he knows it's a critical issue. The public is wary of how their tax dollars are being spent, and this is exactly the kind of controversy that could undermine his message of fiscal responsibility. I think you're mistaken, Victoria, Trump replies. We are focused on cutting unnecessary spending, and that includes media subsidies. When we found out that millions of taxpayer dollars were being used to fund subscriptions to media outlets, we took action. The Doge team is working hard to ensure that every dollar spent is justified. Victoria leans in, sensing an opening. But what about other areas of government spending? What about the inefficiency that's rampant throughout federal agencies? How are you addressing that? Trump takes a moment before answering, his tone measured. We're streamlining the government. We're cutting waste, reducing unnecessary programs, and ensuring that taxpayers are getting value for their money. It's not going to be easy, but we're committed to making the government work for the people. The next topic takes the conversation in a different direction. Victoria brings up the issue of immigration, a topic that has been a central focus of Trump's presidency. Mr. Trump, your administration has been aggressive in arresting illegal immigrants, but reports have emerged that some of them are not being deported. Instead, they're being released with ankle monitors or asked to check in by phone. Can you explain why this is happening? Is this the strong immigration policy you promised? Trump's eyes narrow, but his voice remains firm. The numbers speak for themselves. Over 8,000 people have been arrested since I took office, and less than 6% of them have been released. Those who are released are not being freed without reason. Some of them have serious medical conditions or a lack of deportation options. We are doing everything we can to remove illegal immigrants, but Congress needs to step up and help us. Victoria is quick to challenge him. But doesn't this create a loophole? Doesn't this show that your administration is not fully committed to removing illegal immigrants from the country? Trump doesn't flinch. We are fully committed. But let me be clear. We need Congress to fund the necessary resources to increase detention space and improve our deportation system. If Congress won't act, we can't do everything on our own. The exchange grows heated, But both Trump and Victoria continue to speak over each other, neither willing to back down. Just as the conversation about immigration begins to cool, Victoria raises a more complex issue: Gaza. The topic of the ongoing Israeli-Palestinian conflict is one that Trump has been forced to address time and again. Mr. Trump, you've been in discussions with leaders in the region about Gaza. You've even mentioned that you're willing to help rebuild the area after the conflict with Hamas. But what exactly does that mean? Does this mean American troops could be sent in? And how do you justify sending aid to the region, especially when so many Americans are struggling themselves? Trump leans forward, his voice unwavering. I've made it clear that we will not send troops into Gaza. Our focus is on rebuilding the region with the help of our allies. The goal is to ensure stability in the Middle East. This is not about sending American troops. It's about ensuring that the people in the region have the opportunity for peace and prosperity. We will work with our partners, like Egypt and Jordan, to create a stable environment where all people can live in peace. Victoria remains skeptical. But how can you say this is a stable solution when the Palestinian people have no say in the matter? They don't want to leave Gaza. How do you respond to their concerns? Trump's expression hardens, but his answer is calculated. We are not asking Palestinians to leave their homes. What we are trying to do is remove the elements that have destroyed Gaza. Hamas has turned Gaza into a war zone, and it's the Palestinians who are suffering the most. We're working to give them a future, one that is not controlled by terrorists. Victoria is not convinced, and she presses on. But this is a humanitarian crisis. Shouldn't we be doing more to protect the people of Gaza, rather than focusing on rebuilding after the destruction? Trump's eyes flash with determination. This is about long-term stability. We cannot ignore the root cause of the violence, which is Hamas. We want peace, and peace comes with tough decisions. The next topic is one that has polarized the nation: transgender athletes competing in women's sports. The issue has been a major point of contention between conservatives and liberals, and Victoria brings it up as a way to challenge Trump's stance on women's rights. Mr. Trump, your administration has taken a strong stance on banning transgender women from competing in women's sports. How do you respond to critics who say this policy is discriminatory? Doesn't this harm young transgender people who simply want to compete like everyone else? Trump's response is direct, as always. I believe in protecting women's rights. Women's sports should be for women, and that's what we're focused on. It's unfair for biological males to compete against women. This is about ensuring a level playing field for women, especially young girls who deserve to compete fairly. Victoria counters. But doesn't this policy discriminate against transgender people? Don't they deserve the right to compete too? Trump's face hardens. What's discriminatory is allowing men to take the place of women. We're standing up for women and girls. This isn't about discrimination. It's about fairness. The debate is nearing its conclusion, but the tension between Trump and Victoria is as high as ever. Victoria makes one last attempt to land a final blow. You've been very clear about your policies, Mr. Trump. But let's talk about the bigger picture. Your administration is under constant scrutiny, from accusations of conflict of interest with figures like Elon Musk to the media coverage of your actions. How do you respond to those who say you're using the government to serve your own interests and the interests of your friends? Trump's voice doesn't waver. He's been asked this question before, and his answer has always been the same. We're focused on doing what's best for the American people. We're cutting waste. We're cutting inefficiency, and we're working to ensure that the government is accountable to the people. If some people don't like the way we're doing things, that's their problem. The debate has been long, and emotions are running high. But as the cameras begin to fade, one thing is clear: this political battle is far from over. There's more to come, and both Trump and Lane know that this is just the beginning of a much larger conflict. The studio lights dim as the debate comes to a close. The audience has been on the edge of their seats, captivated by the heated exchange between Donald Trump and Victoria Lane. The cameras turn off, but the room is still charged with energy. The host, producers, and crew begin moving around, preparing for the next segment, but Trump and Lane remain seated, staring at each other across the stage. The tension between them hasn't dissipated. Almost immediately after the debate wraps up, the media outlets begin reporting on the clash. Social media is flooded with reactions, memes, and sound bites, each side interpreting the debate in their own way. For Trump, this is nothing new. The media has always been a battleground, and the fight for public perception is something he's mastered over the years. But the aftermath of this particular debate feels different. In the hours following the broadcast, news outlets dissect the conversation. CNN and MSNBC portray the debate as a failed attempt by Trump to defend his controversial policies. They highlight the moments where Trump seemed defensive, especially when pressed on the issues of immigration and his ties to business mogul Elon Musk. The clip of Trump defending his immigration policy, where he said less than 6% of arrested immigrants had been released, is played repeatedly, with pundits questioning the accuracy of those numbers. Meanwhile, conservative outlets like Fox News and Breitbart spin the conversation in a much more favorable light. They emphasize Trump's stance on government efficiency, his firm belief in protecting women's sports, and his condemnation of the violent rhetoric coming from Democratic leaders. They portray Trump as the stalwart defender of American values, unwavering in the face of criticism from a biased media. Social media platforms explode with heated debates. Supporters of Trump are quick to rally behind him, posting clips of his responses and praising his unwavering stance on issues like immigration and national security. Critics, however, attack his policies, accusing him of being out of touch with the realities many Americans face, particularly when it comes to the treatment of immigrants and his stance on women's rights. The controversy surrounding Elon Musk's involvement in the government doesn't go unnoticed. Although Musk himself wasn't physically present in the studio, his influence looms large over the discussion. As a business magnate and the head of multiple companies with multi-billion-dollar government contracts, Musk's role in the administration has always been a topic of contention. In one of the more widely discussed exchanges, Trump was asked about potential conflicts of interest involving Musk's position as a special government employee, while also owning private companies that receive federal contracts. The question made Trump's tone shift momentarily, though he insisted that Musk had abided by all relevant laws and would recuse himself if any conflicts arose. The media, particularly left-leaning outlets, seize on this moment, raising alarms about possible corruption or undue influence. How can Musk's companies possibly be held accountable when he is both advising the government and profiting from it? They ask. Musk himself, ever the enigmatic figure, offers no immediate response, but his followers continue to defend his involvement, arguing that his innovative ideas are essential to the progress of the administration's efficiency goals. In the days following the debate, Trump's critics continue to hammer him over his connections to Musk, citing concerns about the transparency and integrity of the administration. Meanwhile, Musk remains largely silent, letting the storm blow over. His silence only fuels more speculation about the depth of his influence behind the scenes. One of the most contentious points of the debate was Trump's position on Gaza. Although he emphasized the need for rebuilding the region and working with partners like Egypt and Jordan to ensure stability, Victoria Lane pressed him on the specifics of his plan. Critics quickly pounced on Trump's remarks about rebuilding Gaza, accusing him of being too eager to involve the U.S. in a volatile region that has long been a source of conflict. For many, the idea of sending resources to Gaza, especially in light of the ongoing humanitarian crisis, feels like a foreign policy misstep. Trump's critics argue that he is more focused on making deals and establishing power in the Middle East than addressing domestic concerns. The president is more interested in being a peacemaker than in addressing the real needs of Americans, one commentator on MSNBC states. However, Trump's supporters take a different view. They focus on his belief that lasting peace in the Middle East is essential for global stability and U.S. security. He's thinking ahead. One of Trump's staunch supporters writes on Twitter, "We need to help rebuild Gaza so that the region doesn't implode again. This is what a true leader does." The debate over transgender athletes competing in women's sports also fuels a fierce reaction. Trump's firm stance against allowing transgender women to compete in women's sports has become a flashpoint in the wider culture war. Critics accuse him of ignoring the rights of transgender individuals, calling his policies discriminatory and outdated. In contrast, Trump supporters argue that his position is a matter of fairness for biological women, especially in competitive sports. They assert that allowing transgender women to compete against cisgender women creates an uneven playing field, particularly in physically demanding sports like swimming and track and field. LGBTQ plus advocacy groups express their outrage over Trump's policies, accusing him of using his platform to further marginalize an already vulnerable community. This is just another example of how the Trump administration seeks to silence and erase transgender people, one group states in a press release. On the other side, conservative voices celebrate the policy, praising Trump for standing up for women's rights and ensuring that women's sports remain for biological women. It's about fairness and safety. A prominent conservative commentator states, Trump is doing what's best for our daughters and granddaughters. As the days pass, the fallout from the debate only grows more intense. The divide between Trump supporters and critics deepens, with each side retreating further into their ideological corners. Trump's approval ratings see a slight bump among his base, but his opponents continue to rally against him, pointing to the issues raised during the debate as proof of his administration's failures. The conflict between Trump and the media intensifies as well. Conservative outlets continue to frame him as the champion of American values, while liberal outlets focus on the contradictions and controversies that permeate his administration. It's clear that the battle for public opinion will continue to rage long after the debate is over. As Trump leaves the studio, he knows that this is just one battle in a much larger war. The media, the opposition, and even members of his own party will continue to challenge him at every turn. But for Trump, the debate is a victory of sorts. He has once again stood his ground, reaffirming his commitment to the issues that matter most to his supporters. For Victoria Lane, the debate represents both a personal and professional triumph. She may not have been able to break Trump, but she's exposed the deep divisions within his administration and the challenges that lie ahead for the Trump presidency. The audience may have been captivated, but the real fight is just beginning. The fallout from the debate reverberates through every corner of the political landscape. Hours after the broadcast, cable networks continue to rerun the most dramatic moments, Trump's fiery defense of his policies and Lane's relentless questioning. The hashtag #TrumpLoses is trending on Twitter, as well as #VictoryForLane. Both sides claim victory, but for now, the media's spotlight shines brightly on the controversy sparked by Trump's remarks on Gaza, transgender sports, and Musk's influence. Despite the criticism, Trump's base seems more energized than ever. In the days following the debate, rallies are held in various cities across the country, with passionate supporters waving signs reading, Trump for America's future and fairness for women's sports. The feedback from the heartland is overwhelmingly positive. Interviews with attendees reveal a mixture of admiration and frustration, but they all agree on one thing. Trump is the only politician who stands up for what they believe in. None of the other politicians have the guts to say what needs to be said, says Diane, a rally attendee in Ohio. He doesn't back down, no matter how much the media tries to tear him apart. That's why we stand with him. On conservative talk radio, the narrative is also clear. Trump is a warrior, a man of principles fighting against an unjust media and a left-wing establishment. The more they attacked him, the more it galvanized his supporters. These voices in the media emphasize Trump's unwavering stance on issues like immigration and national security. His commitment to rebuilding Gaza, despite the criticism, is seen as part of a broader vision for Middle East peace, one that his base believes will ultimately benefit America. Meanwhile, the Democratic Party begins to mobilize. Victoria Lane, their standard-bearer, finds herself at the center of a renewed political campaign. Although she received praise from liberal circles, the left-wing media began to scrutinize her responses. The question of whether she truly got the better of Trump lingers. Some pundits argue that while she made strong points, she failed to land the fatal blow. In a show of unity, several high-profile Democratic figures endorse Lane's performance, while also urging their constituents to stay focused on the bigger picture. Senator Elizabeth Warren calls for unity in the face of Trump's divisive rhetoric. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez takes to Twitter, praising Lane's commitment to the issues that matter to everyday Americans, particularly women's rights and immigration reform. However, not everyone in the Democratic Party is as supportive of Lane's approach. Some leaders criticize her for not being more forceful on issues like climate change and healthcare. We need to push for more progressive policies, not just fight Trump on his own terms, says one anonymous Democratic strategist. We can't afford to lose sight of our broader agenda. Lane, in a strategic move, schedules an appearance on MSNBC to discuss her views further. She outlines her plans for comprehensive healthcare reform, a progressive immigration policy, and a more inclusive vision for women's sports. Although her message is well received by liberals, questions remain about her ability to appeal to independent voters and moderate Republicans voters who are increasingly turned off by the political establishment on both sides. Elon Musk, meanwhile, continues to cast a long shadow over the controversy. The billionaire has remained silent since the debate, but his name refuses to leave the headlines. News outlets probe deeper into Musk's role as a special government employee, with questions surrounding the integrity of government contracts involving his companies. Investigative journalists begin to scrutinize the relationships between Musk's businesses and various government contracts, from space exploration to electric cars, and even AI technologies. Many on the left continue to raise alarms about potential conflicts of interest, claiming that Musk's position gives him undue influence over policy decisions. The New York Times publishes an expose on Musk's involvement in government projects, questioning whether the Trump administration is truly prioritizing the public good or if it is more concerned with benefiting Musk's private enterprises. Trump's response to these concerns is simple. He insists that Musk is playing by the rules. In his typical combative style, Trump dismisses the criticisms as fake news and part of the swamp's agenda to discredit anything that disrupts the establishment. He points to Musk's role in pushing for government efficiency, highlighting Musk's contributions to the administration's efforts to streamline federal agencies and cut wasteful spending. In private meetings, Trump also reassures his allies that he will never allow any conflict of interest to go unchecked. His message is clear. Musk is a visionary, and the administration is benefiting from his expertise. Whether or not Musk continues to have an outsized influence on policy remains to be seen, but Trump's commitment to maintaining his relationship with Musk is unwavering. Trump's position on Gaza continues to be a source of both praise and criticism. Supporters see his willingness to rebuild Gaza as a pragmatic, long-term solution to Middle Eastern instability, while critics decry it as an unnecessary entanglement in a region that has long been a source of violence and conflict. On the right, Trump's supporters argue that rebuilding Gaza is a strategic move that will help stabilize the region and prevent future conflict. They point to his history of making deals and his expertise as a negotiator. This is a bold move, says one Trump supporter on Fox News. Trump is thinking ahead, not just about the next election, but about the future of the Middle East. However, the international community remains skeptical. European leaders express concern about the potential ramifications of American involvement in Gaza's reconstruction. Some fear that any U.S. involvement could inflame tensions further, particularly with Iran-backed groups like Hamas. The United Nations also releases a statement urging caution, stressing that the humanitarian crisis in Gaza must be addressed with a long-term, multilateral solution. As the weeks go by, pressure mounts on Trump to clarify his plans for Gaza. Critics accuse him of lacking a clear vision, while supporters demand that he follow through on his promise of peace in the region. For now, however, Trump remains resolute, insisting that peace can only be achieved through strength and decisive action. As the political storm intensifies, the divide between Trump's supporters and his critics only grows wider. For every rally that Trump holds, there is a counter-protest organized by those who oppose him. Protests erupt in major cities as Democrats and progressives demand accountability from the Trump administration. Meanwhile, the president's base continues to rally around him, convinced that he is the only one willing to stand up for their values and priorities. The media continues to play a critical role in shaping public opinion. News outlets on both sides of the political spectrum intensify their coverage, portraying Trump and Lane as two sides of the same coin. For some, Trump is a hero fighting for the future of America. For others, he is a villain tearing the country apart. With the next election cycle on the horizon, it's clear that the stakes have never been higher. Trump, having survived countless controversies, continues to push forward with his agenda. Lane, for her part, remains a fierce advocate for progressive policies, but faces increasing pressure to distance herself from the more radical elements of her party. As the political tension builds, the stage is set for a dramatic turn of events. The debate over Trump's policies grows more contentious, with both his supporters and detractors becoming more entrenched in their positions. The media's role in shaping public opinion reaches a fever pitch, with constant coverage of the latest political squabbles. But the real turning point arrives when new revelations about Elon Musk's involvement in government projects hit the headlines. A bombshell report by investigative journalists uncovers a web of connections between Musk's businesses and federal contracts that go far beyond what was previously known. The report suggests that Musk, through his companies, may have benefited from preferential treatment in securing lucrative government contracts related to space exploration, technology development, and military projects. The news spreads like wildfire, igniting a firestorm of controversy. Critics of Trump argue that the administration has turned a blind eye to potential conflicts of interest, while his supporters dismiss the report as just another smear campaign by the media. Trump, ever defiant, calls the accusations fake news and insists that Musk has been an invaluable asset to the country. The fallout from this revelation is swift and severe. Congressional hearings are called, and calls for investigations into Musk's role in the administration grow louder. Lane, ever the opportunist, uses this moment to launch a scathing attack on Trump, accusing him of undermining the integrity of the government by allowing corporate interests to dictate policy. Meanwhile, Trump's allies circle the wagons. They argue that Musk's involvement is in line with Trump's goal of making government more efficient, and that any suggestion of impropriety is nothing more than a partisan attack. The battle over Musk's influence in the administration reaches a boiling point, and the media continues to spin the story in different directions, with no clear resolution in sight. As the nation braces for the political fallout, both Trump and Lane prepare for what could be the final showdown, a battle not just for the presidency, but for the very soul of the nation. With the next election looming, everything is at stake, and the road ahead promises to be filled with even more twists and turns. The televised debate reaches its zenith as Trump and Lane exchange their final blows. The questions grow sharper, the accusations more pointed, and the stakes higher than ever. The media frenzy has reached an unprecedented intensity, with millions watching, waiting to see who will emerge victorious in this heated battle of ideologies. Trump, unyielding as ever, defends his policies with the fire of someone who knows his legacy is on the line. Lane, poised and calculating, strikes at the heart of his administration's most controversial moves, from Musk's role to the handling of Gaza and immigration. But as the cameras roll, something unexpected happens. Despite their polarizing views, there's a moment of mutual respect in the exchange. Each knows the other represents a significant force in the nation's future. The debate ends with no clear winner, but the dialogue lingers, sparking further discussion across the nation. In the days following, the political world remains divided, but the debate sets the stage for what promises to be the most tumultuous election cycle in modern history. Trump and Lane, for all their differences, have one thing in common. They are both shaping the future of America in their own image.